Joining us now on Somehow He Manages, a guy who's Tar Heel born and Tar Heel bred, and we're very excited to have him on today, Mr. Adam Lucas. Mr. Lucas, how you doing, sir?
I'm good. How about you? Please call me Adam.
Adam, I apologize. That's the Southern upbringing in me, calling everybody sir. But yeah, Adam will do. Yeah, we're like I said, we're happy to have you on today, and like I said, you are a Carolina guy through and through, and that's one of the reasons I'm excited to talk to you today. I've read that you grew up diehard Carolina fan, and so for you professionally, what does it mean for you to be a part of such a historic, not just athletic department, but at a historic university?
Yeah, it's not even like a real job. I don't really go to work every day. I just go have fun. And then for some reason, they still send me a check at the end of the month. I never knew that this was a job that you could actually do. I always just assumed I would play point guard for the Tar Heels and then play in the NBA for about 15 years and then probably be the head coach of the Tar Heels after that. Surprisingly, that career path did not work out. But to be able to do this and to be able to go to games and be part of the way that people experience Carolina athletics is something I couldn't have even dreamed was a possibility.
So it's no surprise to you that things have changed so much in college athletics here recently, and they're just changing so rapidly. I mean, as we speak, how do you think Carolina is handling all these new changes and developments in college athletics?
It's tough because no one really knows how you're doing because there are no rules.
Right.
All the rules that you were told you had to follow ever since the dawn of college athletics, we've now decided here in the last 2 years, oh, those aren't the rules anymore. So everyone basically do whatever you want. It'll depend largely on what state you're in and what rules that particular state makes, which is not something that's really ever mattered to college athletics. It was more about the conference. Well, now it's very much about, what does my state legislature think? Well, the North Carolina state legislature is not quite the same as the Texas state legislature. So that's a tricky situation. And that's why we're in this spot where there's so much talk about, well, maybe the NCAA will just go to Congress. Well, that's not something any sports fan wants to hear.
Right.
They just want to know who's going to play quarterback next season. But a lot of that depends on what your state government is doing and where that quarterback might have the opportunity to go make the best money for themselves. So it's just an incredibly different time. And if you had dropped down into 2 years ago and told us what was happening now, everyone would have said, there's no chance that'll ever happen. That's not college sports. But today it is.
So another subject that I don't want to dwell on too much, but I'm curious about your opinion on it. In the years since the academic scandal at UNC, how do you think things have changed, and how do you think they've rebounded? Since all those allegations came out and everything kind of has settled.
I honestly have not thought about that a ton recently, which I think is a good sign. There obviously
Certainly
was a time where that was something that was thought about every single day and was a topic of discussion every single day. It really hasn't been since then. I think Carolina made some adjustments, as have a lot of schools, I think. But I mean, I'm around a lot of student athletes every day in a lot of different sports, and they're doing things on the field, but also especially in the classroom that I know I couldn't have done when I was in college. And the things that they're managing and doing and performing in the classroom every single day, most of us who like to sit here and talk about what they're doing, we could not have done ourselves. So I don't really have any questions about what anyone at Carolina is doing in the classroom, especially when you take it into a big picture of everything else that they're doing for the university.
So I know that your expertise is more so Carolina basketball. Again, it's no surprise to anyone. They are one of the blue blood programs and probably will continue to be. What do you think separates Carolina, though, from the Dukes, the Kentuckys, the Kansases, those, elite upper echelon programs?
Yeah, I definitely think there's 3 or 4 that are in a class by themselves. And I think every year there's 5 or 10 who try to claw their way up to that group, but that group is always going to be that group.
Right.
I think the thing that differentiates Carolina from that group always has been and continues to be the Carolina family, and just that feeling that once you come and play at the University of North Carolina, that is a group that you'll be part of for the rest of your life. And that goes far beyond the basketball court. We see it every summer when guys come back, and then former teammates are going to weddings. And recently Cecil Exum, who was a player in the early 80s, passed away. And there were players there from all generations of Carolina basketball because that was a family member. Hubert Davis went. Hubert Davis never played with Cecil Exum. But that's just how things are here. Obviously, I don't have the firsthand knowledge of how it is at other places, but my perception from talking to folks at some of those other places is that it's not quite the same. And that all goes back to Dean Smith and what he started and what he cultivated. And it's been half a century now of trying to keep that alive and make that the way that Carolina basketball does things.
So in your time covering UNC athletics, who have been some of the more fascinating players that you've been able to cover?
It seems like there's new ones every year. I mean,
Oh yeah,
Marcus Page will always be a favorite of mine, just because of the way he performed on the court, but also how he handled himself off the court. And it's so great to have him back here, member of the coaching staff now, and you'll see him on the bench with the Tar Heels this year. Anytime you start narrowing it down like this, it gets tricky. Luke May is another one who was just so important to the university as a whole, beyond just the things everybody saw on the basketball court. The things he did away from the basketball court made Chapel Hill a better place. By the way, he was also really good at basketball. So it's people like that. I mean, somebody like Roy Williams, who obviously won a lot of basketball games, but what people never saw is that Saturday night he's coaching a basketball game at Boston College or something, and then on Sunday he's at the women's basketball game at Carmichael, just because he just loves the Tar Heels. And if they're playing whatever sport, he's going to be there. He and his wife Wanda will be there. He's supported them with his attendance. He's supported them significantly financially in a way that people just have no idea about. So it's those kind of folks who Carolina just gets in their blood, and they just can't help but be part of it.
yeah, and I touched on earlier, your lifelong passion for UNC. When you got this job, how do you think that upbringing, that you being a fan of UNC, how do you think that affected you personally or as a professional, I should say?
Oh, I think that's the whole thing. I mean, I think that's if I do connect with people, I think that's how, because I was raised the same way they were, and I've got the same frame of reference that they were. I've sat there and cried when the Tar Heels have lost games when I was a little kid, knew I was going to have to go to school the next day, and all my state fan friends were going to make fun of me because the Tar Heels lost. And I've gone to school the next day wearing my Carolina sweatshirt because the Tar Heels just beat Duke, and I was proud of it and was going to talk some trash. So I've lived all the things that they're all living, and that's the way I try to cover Carolina, is through that lens and give them a little insight. I think everybody sees what happens on the court, especially now. You can see every game in a variety of different ways anytime you want to. Some of the stuff behind the scenes you can't see as well. And that's what I hope I'm able to give people a little bit of a taste of, so that they can just have a little more full picture of what Carolina athletics is.
I want to talk a little bit about football, because we're in summer and we're getting in here into football season. There are some expectations for UNC this year, especially with Drake May. In your opinion, how high is the ceiling for Mac Brown and company this fall?
I mean, I think you've got potentially the best quarterback in the country. So you've got potentially the best player at definitely the most important position in the country. So the ceiling is high. I mean, Drake May is probably the best quarterback Carolina's ever had. If he has the kind of year he wants to have, he'll end that conversation. And it won't be probably the best quarterback. It'll be he is the best quarterback Carolina's ever had. Can the defense be better than it was last year? Which, if you and I go out there with 9 others, we've got a decent chance to be better than the defense was last year. I think they can. I think they've made some improvements, both personnel wise and on the coaching side, that enable them to get a little more pressure on the quarterback to defend the pass a little more effectively. You've got a couple good linebackers there who are already good in Cedric Gray and Power Eccles. So the middle part of the defense is pretty solid. It's the front and the back that I think folks are worried about. But if the defense could just be average, then Carolina's got a shot to win every single game, because their offense, most times they go on the field, is going to be the best offense playing in that game.
So do you think it's fair to say that the defense is the X factor this year?
I don't even know if it's the X factor, because it's like, it is the factor. I think an X factor would be more like what kind of production does Carolina get from the running game, or does the offensive line show some improvement or something like that? Like, I think every game Carolina goes into, the storyline will be, is the defense going to tackle people and not give up a lot of touchdowns? And if so, Carolina's got a chance to win.
How do you feel about the new no, well, not, I was going to say conference realignment, but that's not the right word. The new not divisionless football is what I should say. How do you think that's going to affect things for UNC football?
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. The divisions ebbed and flowed so much. One year the Atlantic's clearly the best, and everybody's like, "Oh, no one could ever succeed in the mighty Atlantic." And the next year the Atlantic's terrible, and everybody's like, "Oh, no one could ever succeed in the mighty Coastal." So I still think whether you have divisions or not, a whole lot of it depends on how your schedule falls and who you play and where you play them. Mac Brown has said he feels like Carolina's got a really tough schedule this year, especially with the way it ends. The Tar Heels have to travel to Clemson, and then they've got tough games with Duke and NC State there towards the end, which are always difficult games for Carolina. But overall, I think the Tar Heels, other than that trip to Clemson, I think the Tar Heels probably play some teams they feel like they're on at least equal footing with in favorable locations. I mean, Carolina's at home basically the whole month of October. Like that's how you build your resume at the time when everybody's thinking about college football. The goal is to go into November with the chance to play meaningful games. Carolina's a chance to build a resume to do that while playing at Caegan Stadium. That's the best you can hope for.
Okay, and so I wanna touch on basketball now, which I know is your bread and butter. There's been some highs and lows with Hubert Davis. This upcoming year, how crucial, if at all, is this season for Hubert Davis? For his time at Carolina.
I think every season is crucial when you're the head coach at Carolina basketball because it's one of the only places in the country, as you said earlier, where there really is no cushion. And what you did last year doesn't really get you any sort of bonus or any sort of comfort from fans because they want to know what you're doing tonight. And so I think this year is an important year for Hubert Davis because it is this year. And I think he made the adjustments that he needed to make in the summer in terms of the personnel. I think the Tar Heels looked at how they did and did not succeed on the court last year and made some adjustments to that in ways that I think will make them a more effective team playing the way that Hubert Davis wants them to play. But also, this is college basketball in the year 2023. And what you did last year really has no relevance to this year because you have an entirely different team. I mean, Carolina could easily put 5 new guys on the court this year, and that could be their best 5.
Yeah.
So it's not like the old days where you have a down year and you're like, oh boy, it's going to take 2 or 3 years to get out of this.
Yeah.
No, it'll take you a couple weeks. You just wait till somebody gets unhappy and wants to go somewhere else. Boom, you got your new team. And that's very much what the Tar Heels have done. You hope, and I think Hubert Davis has emphasized, he doesn't just want mercenaries who are out there to for themselves. He very consciously tries to get guys, as he says, who want to unpack their bags and be part of the program. And I think that's what the Tar Heels have got, but they've also got some guys who are hungry to win because both the players returning from last year and the guys who have come in from other college programs, they didn't win a whole lot last year, and they're ready to do that now.
So in the backbone will no doubt be R.J. Davis and Armando Bacot. What do you think we have to see from those two guys to, have a different outcome this year?
Well, I think Armando knows that he maybe wasn't his most productive self last year. He had a great season before that, and especially that run when everyone was great as Carolina went to the Final Four in New Orleans and made it to the national championship game. I think there may have been team-wide a little sense of, hey, we've accomplished something last summer around this time. And I think that bled into the season some. I think both Armando and RJ have been here long enough that if they're going to lead the team, it is time to do so. But also, I think that if they're not going to lead the team, that's okay. If you're willing to let someone else step forward in that role, it may be that you're just not super comfortable with that. And Carolina saw that last year with Leaky Black. Like, that's just not who he was. But I think there always was a constant feeling that, should we wait and see what Leaky's going to say? Well, Leaky's not going to say anything. That's just not who he is. So if that's the role they want to take this year, then someone like maybe Cormac Ryan or a Paxson Wojcik, 2 newcomers Carolina has who have been really vocal this summer. That may be their job, even though they haven't been here as long as Armando and RJ. It may be their job. In terms of on the court, RJ is going to have a great year. It's going to help Carolina a ton, I think, to maybe only have one guy instead of 2 who are most interested in doing what RJ is interested in doing. I think that's going to create better shots for him just by default and just put him in a more comfortable place on the court.
So probably my most famous thing my most favorite work that you've done that I saw recently was what you wrote on senior night about the managers at Carolina, and yeah, I related so much that I was a manager at UNC Wilmington, and I sent it to my mom, and she was like, "Oh my God, this is great!" I just cried reading that. Um, but I want to know, because like we talked about, Carolina is a place that's just different. You know, the standard is just higher there. So I want to know what your daughter's experience was like as a manager with UNC basketball.
Virginia loved it. And in fact, she's going to grad school this coming fall at Ohio University, and she's going to be a manager for them also. Like, that's how much she
Awesome.
loved it.
That's awesome.
Although it was funny because the folks at Ohio were like, yeah, we'd love to get some coaching points from you that you picked up at Carolina. And I was like, you don't need to be given any coaching points, maybe some organizational things, but let's don't diagram any place. It was great. She spent the first year with the JV program. Her second year was COVID, which was weird for everyone. But then these last 2 years with Coach Davis have been incredible. The way he's treated everybody in the program, including the managers, has been as though everyone is essentially the same, which is something he learned from Coach Smith. Her getting to know the guys that everyone sees on TV, I think really helped her in terms of just having some perspective. Like, if RJ shoots 2 of 13, it's probably not because he sucks. It might be like maybe he did bad on a test, or he's having trouble with a girlfriend.
Yep.
Like, they have actual lives other than when you see them on television.
Yep.
And I think that was really helpful. And I think it was helpful for me to see them through her. Like, she genuinely liked all of them. And I think sometimes we feel required to like them because, oh, they're Tar Heels, so we have to like them.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to. They are actually fun, good people to be around. And getting to see them in that light just kind of reminded me that they're still good people, even if they, lose to Duke at Cameron Indoor Stadium.
So I want to put you on the spot here as I begin to close. I want to know your top 5 most significant moments as a UNC fan in your life watching UNC athletics. Maybe not necessarily the biggest wins, but the most significant in your eyes.
Oh boy. Okay. Okay. The 2 that immediately come to mind, like pre-job, the 1989 ACC championship game in Atlanta. It was at the Omni. I went with my parents. I had never seen Carolina win the ACC tournament, which, granted, at this point it had been 7 years, so not a long time. But in my mind, it was like forever. And I was is Carolina ever going to win the ACC tournament? And they finally did. And I just remember every second of that game. A couple Duke players got technical fouls, which I thought was so cool because, like when you're a little kid and somebody gets a technical foul, you're like, ooh, they really broke the rules.
Yeah.
Like, really bad. And then right after that, the 93 championship in New Orleans, I was there for that. Went with my parents again. Carolina played Michigan in the Fab Five, and the Fab Five were like the coolest thing ever. Like, even I, as a Carolina fan, had to admit, like, I think Michigan is cooler than the Tar Heels, but I really wanted the Tar Heels to win. And so seeing Carolina win, and then we saw Chris Webber on Bourbon Street after the game, and it was like, whoa, there's the guy who played in the game, but he's an actual person. Yeah. So that was crazy. So those 2 for sure. Then, like, post job, I was lucky to be doing the radio with Jones Angell when Carolina baseball went to the College World Series for like a million years in a row in the early 2000s. It started in 2006. And we did the game where Chad Flack hit the home run in Alabama that sent Carolina to Omaha for the first time in about 20 years. And just that feeling of that play, like that walk-off home run, and we had gotten pretty close to the families and the players and the coaches, and just what that did for all of them. And I'll never forget going back to the hotel after that game, and just sheer joy was incredible. Then I'd throw in, like, this is totally cheating, the 05, 09, and 17 championships are all in a group, because I never thought I'd get to experience that on the level that I did. I remember standing on the court in 05, and they were going to play One Shining Moment on the video board in St. Louis. And I've watched One Shining Moment every single year as a kid. It's like the highlight of the spring.
Yeah.
And I remember I was standing right there next to David Noel, and I was like, I am on the court at the championship game, and the Tar Heels just won the championship, and I'm going to watch One Shining Moment next to David Noel. Like, I don't know if it'll ever get better than this. I probably should just never do anything the rest of my life. And then the fifth thing has got to be the 22 Final Four in New Orleans and the win over Duke. That's the only thing that comes close to like that sheer jubilation that I mentioned in that baseball game. I've never seen that kind of emotion at any kind of event, whether sporting or anything, where people were just so happy. And like, how often do you get so happy that you can't do anything but cry? And there were just people crying and like strangers hugging strangers. And it was incredible. I'm getting chills right now just thinking about it. And it was nice that Carolina won the game, obviously, but just the effect it had on people and continues to have to people. If you bring that game up now to people who were there, they'll tell you the same thing. To be able to experience that is something that you don't get to do in any job, much less this job. And so getting to do that is got to be on the list.
Yeah, and just like you said, the sheer emotion in that moment, I think most of the talking heads, in sports and here locally, agree that it may be a long time before Duke can ever really recover from that. And there again, they're going to continue to win. Carolina's going to continue to win. They're going to continue to be great programs, but they're going to hold that. Carolina's going to hold that over Duke's head for a long time, and there's only going to be one real way to top it. Maybe is to beat them in the Final Four again. I mean, the ACC championship is good, but it's not that stage. I'm with you. The sheer emotion in that moment was just, I don't know, it was almost too much.
It was definitely too much leading up to it because
Yeah.
I was so stressed out the day of that game. My kids will tell you, and my wife will tell you, like, you did not want to talk to me that day because just the prospect of losing that game was so horrific that you couldn't even really consider how good it might be to win it. And then when it happened, and I really think the underrated part of that game is there weren't a ton of timeouts at the end. Like the last 90 seconds went off without a lot of stoppages. And so you didn't have time to sit there and think, oh, I think this might happen. It just happened. And then when it happened, that's what caused the emotions that everybody had.
Yeah, and you talk about you being nervous about it. I can't imagine how somebody like Hubert Davis feels in that moment. I mean, he's leading the charge. He's part of the Carolina family. Played for Dean Smith. He's following Roy Williams. This is a game that people have been waiting on for so long, and he's the one who's responsible. I can't imagine. I mean, and to be in that position, you have to have nerves of steel. I think to a certain degree, but I can't imagine what the coaching staff having to prepare for that game. Having to lead those kids. I can't imagine the emotions that they felt going into that.
It's funny talking to Roy Williams after that game. He said he would have rather been on the bench than have to watch it in the stands because on the bench he felt like he could do something, but in the stands all he could do was just sit there. And I was like, yeah, that's how the rest of us have been living for our entire lives. But you're right, it's something special that people who get to that level have, that when they're actually involved in it, and the players too, they have the ability to function in the way that you or I don't know about you, but I know for sure we could not. If I was on the floor in the Superdome that night, I would not have hit the rim because like, there's Coach K over there. This is our chance. We might be rid of him. And then I'd like fling it into the third row. Those guys don't have that. They have the ability to perform at that moment in a way that's unlike the rest of us.
Yeah, and that's such a good point from Coach Williams there. Like as a fan, I think that's what makes sports. It's the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. But when you reach that low, I think that's what tortures at fans. Because like you said, you have no bearing on it whatsoever, and it's just like you got to wait till next. If it's a game like that at the end of the season, you have to wait till next year, and there's this anticipation that builds in the off season. But yeah, that's an excellent point. It can be very difficult to have to sit and watch and just see what happens.
That's why we all have these weird things that we do that we know are completely weird and make no difference. Like, oh, if I wear this shirt,
Yes,
my team might have a chance to win. Like,
yeah,
we know that doesn't matter. We know it. But do we really know it? Like, we think it might have a difference. So you got to try it just in case it makes a difference.
yeah.
Like, there was one season where I got convinced that like the route I was taking to the Smith Center was making Carolina win games. And I had to go that way because when I started going that way, Carolina started winning. Well, in my heart, I know that wasn't really why Carolina was winning. But did I keep going that way? Oh, heck yeah. Because I had to feel like that somehow I was making a difference.
You had to help. Yeah, no question. Okay, so I'm going to ask you one final question here. And you've probably, I don't know, you may have answered this a million times before, but I want your all-time UNC basketball starting five.
Okay. Well, we got to have Tyler Hansbrough. So there's one. I got to have Kenny Smith because that was my guy when I was growing up.
Okay.
I fully understand he may not be the best Tar Heel point guard of all time, but that was my guy. That's who I pretended to be in the driveway when I was shooting baskets. He was my favorite Tar Heel, so I got to have him. I'm pretty sure we got to have Michael Jordan. I think it's almost kind of become cool to say, like, well, he wasn't that good in college. Yes, he was. Like, go back and watch the games. He was that, and he was something we hadn't really seen in college in that way to that point. So give me him. Give me Antoine Jameson because the dude could just score in ways that people couldn't stop, and they all knew what was going to happen, and they couldn't do anything about it. And then I never saw this guy play, but just the way he is on the record books, I got to have him. I got to have Lenny Rosenbluth. The dude played without a three-point line, only played 3 seasons at Carolina, and he's all over every single scoring record. Now, do I think that if Lenny Rosenbluth lined up against James Worthy, that Lenny Rosenbluth could stop James Worthy? Probably not. But all I know is what's in the books and the fact that his teammates say, when we needed a basket, we just threw the ball to him, and he figured out a way to put it in. He must have been great. There's no other explanation for the numbers. So while I understand that if we're going to play a one-on-one game, there's plenty of other Tar Heels who would beat him just based on the records. I think I've got to have him.
Okay, so my 5 is similar. So I went Phil Ford, MJ, the obvious choice, James Worthy, Antoine Jameson, and then Hansbrough.
Yeah. So, I mean,
go ahead.
Well, and people love Phil Ford, and I never saw him play either, but like there's a lot of people who would tell you he is their favorite Tar Heel ever, including Jordan, Hansbrough, anybody. So you can't go wrong having him on the team.
Yeah, and Phil Ford is, I mean, like you say, you mentioned Lenny Rosenbluth, but he's probably the first superstar at Carolina, and he was one of the first great black players, so that was, just a different style of play. It was a changing game, but I think that's his significance there is he was just much, like I said, more of a star than maybe those guys, in the old days. But yeah, so are you of the opinion is Hansbrough, is he the best ever to play at Carolina? Just the stats speak for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, the best college player.
Right.
I think probably so. And just the way that he willed himself to be great. And it's important, in my opinion, that he won a national championship.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what hurts Phil Ford a lot, who I think is one of the all-time greats. But I don't know if you can be the all-time great if you didn't win a title. And Tyler came back as a senior with all the pressure of having made it to the Final Four as a junior. Carolina got blown out by Kansas. And he came back and was very open. I'm coming back to win a title. And then he did it. And Carolina destroyed people in that 09 in the 09 tournament. And he was a big part of that. So to me, like, that's the thing that makes it really hard to argue against him is he said what he was going to do. He did it all individually. He got all the individual records. But then he said, we're going to do this as a team. And he went out and did it.
A guy that you've mentioned already, who I think has a huge what if attached to his name, at least for me personally, Marcus Page, because everybody remembers the Chris Jenkins shot, but I don't know why we don't talk enough about Marcus Page hits the shot of the century right before that. And, if he doesn't hit that shot, which that was to tie the game, was it not? That yes. I don't think it was to take the lead. Yes. Yeah. But, if Carolina pulls that out, how differently do we talk about Marcus Page, in UNC lore? Because he had a phenomenal career at UNC, and he was, like you said, he was so clutch. You think about the shot he hit against State, hit that shot in the tournament. I mean, the guy was just so good all 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, that was the only bittersweet thing about the 17 championship was that Marcus and Bryce didn't get a ring. And in many ways, I think Marcus coming back on the coaching staff is kind of similar to Hubert Davis, who didn't get a ring in the 91 Final Four. And I think that really always bothered him. Like he said, he went back every summer and watched losing games from his Carolina career that made a big impact on him. And it was so important to him when he was a part of the staff in 17 that won it. I hope that one day we're talking about Marcus in that same way that, look, almost brought Carolina all the way back against Villanova in 16. Everyone on that 16 team will tell you if that game had gone into overtime, Carolina was going to win that game. But Chris Jenkins made a great shot. Marcus almost brings Carolina back against Villanova, but then comes back, gets on the coaching staff, hopefully wins a title in that role. And I just can't wait to see how meaningful that'll be to him, because he's somebody who just bleeds Carolina, and the opportunity to compete again for the Tar Heels, I think, is something he's really excited about.
Yeah, and I think, talk about the Carolina family. He'll fit right in. So he's so well liked. I mean, I think he'll do so well in that role. He's player development, right? Isn't that his role? Isn't that his title? Okay, yeah.
Well, but there's a new NCAA rule this year that you can have 6 coaches instructing on the court in practice. And so, whereas last year, if he was in that role, he wouldn't have been able to talk during practice. This year, he can.
Right.
And so, I think that'll make this team even that much better, being able to learn from him, because he's got a lot to offer, not just as a Tar Heel, but people forget he had a very successful career internationally. I think people kind of sleep on international basketball, but I think it really helps to be able to go overseas, experience some different things than what you saw at Carolina, play the game a different way, be coached by different coaches, and then bring all that knowledge back and sort of fuse it with the Carolina approach. And you've got a much broader perspective and a different way to attack things.
Okay, and I'll close on this, because I think you brought up another excellent point when we were talking about Marcus becoming a coach and sort of this idea of unfinished business. I think it applies to a lot of coaches, and I certainly think it applies to managers, because a lot of times managers were not maybe the best athlete in high school or whatever, and so this gives you a chance to be a part of something even bigger. And so I'm curious if you agree with that. Do you think that maybe people get into coaching? I mean, obviously there's a love for the game. You don't work that schedule if you don't love whatever you're coaching. But do you think there's sort of that element of like, sort of, like I said, unfinished business? You want to be a part of, something bigger. Do you agree with that?
I think so. And I think that's why sometimes your greatest players have trouble being a coach.
Yes.
Because they've done it. And they also don't understand why the people they're coaching can't do it like they did it. And I think that's one thing that makes Hubert Davis a little bit unique, is that he was a very good NBA player on some very good NBA teams, but still is pretty good at teaching it. I mean, if Hubert Davis and Roy Williams go head to head on the basketball court, Hubert Davis is going to smoke him. But Roy Williams had a way of teaching it that was just on another level. Same thing with Dean Smith. He wasn't a great college player. He was on the end of the bench at Kansas. So I think sometimes it's hard for the really good players to make that move into coaching for a variety of reasons, including what you said, that like they've reached the pinnacle that they've always dreamed of. And I think for most of the rest of us, there comes a time when we realize, okay, I might not be able to do this as a player. There's other people who are a lot better than me. I need to find another role for myself. The really great players never had that realization. They always just think, I'll just keep going. I'll just keep going up the ladder, and I'll just keep being better than everybody. That's tough to do in coaching, because you're dealing with a whole different set of variables. It's just 2 really different skill sets that I don't think cross over that much.
And perhaps the biggest example of that, the best player of all time, who was not necessarily the best owner of all time, who recently sold the Charlotte Hornets. How do you feel about Jordan, making that move?
May not have been the best owner of all time, but might have been the most financially savvy owner of all time, because
he went straight to the bank. Yeah.
Yeah. Boatload of money
on
if you're just judging it as a business, maybe not the most successful business, like no NBA championships, right, playoff appearances negligible, draft choices not always working out, $1 billion in the bank. Yes. So successful in some other ways, maybe not necessarily on the court.
Yeah, well, and I've said this several times, he's laughing his way right to the bank. So, I don't think Jordan is going to lose much sleep over it.
I'm glad that worked out for him financially, because I feel like he was in trouble, and hopefully that'll bail him out a little, since none of his other financial ventures have worked out, and he certainly had no ability to make a living for himself.
Yeah. Well, we'll close on that. Adam, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you today. Like I said, there are a lot of great storylines heading into football season, basketball season for Carolina this year. We'll see how they shake out. There'll be a lot for you to write about. There'll be a lot for, Carolina fans to talk about, but it should be interesting. So we'll see how it goes, and wish you the very best of luck moving forward.
Looking forward to it. Really appreciate you having me, and appreciate all the folks who let us be part of the way that they experience everything Carolina Athletics.
Yep. All right. Appreciate it. It's been an honor talking to you.